Good evening and welcome to Inside Government for the fall 2016 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show broadcast on Time Warner Communications as well as Verizon Fios, as well as the Regional Media Access, ARMA, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have back in the studio Cayuga County Legislative Chairman Keith Batman, who represents the 7th District in the Cayuga County Legislature, which includes the towns of Ledyard, Scipio, and Springport. It has been a busy several months and summer since he was last here in April to talk about what was going on in the county, but we're going to talk to him about the budget front as well as the 2% mandated tax cap that is really below 2%, and we'll explain that in a few minutes, as well as address other issues that have been facing the legislature, including the issue of blue algae in Owasco Lake and the loss of one of its members, Mark Farrell, a Democrat who resigned and was replaced by independent Grant Kyle last month. We'll also talk about this and more in the next half hour. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Glad to talk to you. Let's talk about budget first, because I know right now fall is a busy time for the legislature, though you have been dealing with budget since the last budget was adopted last December.
That's correct.
So where are you in preparation for the 2017 budget?
Well, we have an initial kind of overview from the Administrator, Suzanne Sinclair. And it's actually in better shape than I thought it might be at this point. We're still not where we need to be. We're somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million in the red, and we need to close that gap. But that's very good for this early. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to have.
So this is what she presented to you about 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
So when you say $750,000, if that is without using fund balance, or is using?
No, we have to. Well, we have to balance it. So three quarters of $1 million to $1 million in the red means a draw of $750,000 or $1 million.
If you went into fund balance.
Yes.
Okay. So how big? Because you, when you came back on here in April, and you've been consistent. You said this is the state of the city and state of the county. I think at the end of March. As far as you're concerned, and many of your fellow legislators, if you have to use a fund balance, that is not a balanced budget.
That's correct.
Okay.
With this caveat, we always can find, it's a big budget, it's $150 million. So during the year, you can always find some money. So a budget that has a deficit of $500,000 to $750,000 is actually, at the end of the year, will be balanced, because you just find savings during the year. A position becomes open, you don't fill it for a month.
That's if you use that small of a fund balance. If you choose $2 or $3 million, that is not the case, which is has occurred on occasion.
It has occurred on occasion, but we have absolutely no intention of doing that. We have to move to a balanced budget. We have to.
So your budget is a January 1st, December 31st?
That's correct.
And so you said your current budget is about $150,000. Is it going to go up for 2017, roughly?
$150 million.
I'm sorry, $150 million.
Yes.
You wish it was 1,000.
Yeah, it would be easier.
Life would be easy, but it's 150. How is there a big jump from year to year?
No, well, there cannot be a big jump anymore, because you mentioned the tax cap coming in. The tax cap this year will be about somewhere around 0.71%, so less than 1%.
Okay, so let's deal with Albany's poor math to start with. So they say it's a 2% tax cap,
right?
But that is what it is, unless inflation. It's whatever's lower. If inflation is lower, which it is right now, which if you're a consumer, that's great.
That's great.
If you're a government, that's bad, because the number is much lower. So, for example, Mayor Quill, I think at the State of the City, said that with their budget back last June, they could raise taxes by $15,000, which would get them half of a police car or about 150 feet of blacktop. Not a whole lot. How much does this number, because this is the way Albany wrote it.
Right.
Am I correct on this?
That's correct.
It's not a choice you have.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, we can override the tax.
No. But what I'm saying is the number you have. Well, even if you've override. So what is the number right now? You said
0.71%.
So if you went to 0.72%, you'd have to override.
Yes. Yeah, and we have no intention of doing that.
Okay.
So I'm just saying it's a possibility, but we have no intention of doing that. Yeah, and it represents the somewhere. I have to do this math real quick. You may not quote me on this math, because I'm going to do it in my head, but it's about $170,000 to $200,000. So
much less than your gap.
Yeah. So we got right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, and our gap at this point counts a 0.71% increase in the taxes. Yeah.
So does, so even if you went to the top of the, stayed within the tax cap but did the tax cap
That's correct.
level, you still have that gap?
Right, yeah.
So with that all, you're in the process right now where she will present a fuller budget at
Yes.
some point. When will that be?
I'm trying to remember our budget calendar. Forgive me for being approximate, but the approximate, it will be on or about October 28th.
So at the end of this month, then you'll have discussions for roughly 2 months,
Yes.
and then the full legislature will vote on this roughly when?
The third week in December. We have to have a budget absolutely by December 20th. That's the law. So we hope to have a budget the week before that.
So years before you came on the legislature, there was a time period, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that, where the legislature did not approve the presented budget, and then it still went into effect,
Yes.
even without changes. Can that still occur? Is that still the rule?
Yes. Yeah, the way it works is that a budget is presented by the budget officer, in our case the county administrator. The Ways and Means Committee looks at that, makes recommendations to the full legislature for changes. The legislature votes on those changes. That then becomes the preliminary budget. That budget is the budget then that goes into effect if a final budget cannot be agreed on.
So this is where I'm getting creative with this whole tax cap issue. What happens if your Ways and Means Committee presents a preliminary budget that does go over the tax cap, but the legislature rejects it? Does it still go into effect?
No, not if the legislature rejects it.
Okay.
Right.
So
then you go back to the original budget that the administrator presented.
And what happens if the administrator had put in something that raises the tax, goes way above?
I will ask her not to.
Well, no, but I guess what I'm looking at, so where I'm going with this is the legislature discussed a couple of months ago, back in the summer, about 3 months ago, this issue of the motor vehicle tax.
Yes.
First of all, tell us what that was, and it was only a discussion, it has not been adopted,
That's
correct?
correct.
So what was being proposed?
That was an additional fee, $5 on non-commercial vehicles, $10 on commercial vehicles on the registration. So when you get your license plate, when you re-register your vehicle, it would be an additional fee.
So is that, it was tabled, does that mean it's dead? Or could it still?
No, it's still, the reason it was tabled instead of adopted is because many people had questions about how important it would be to raise additional fees, additional money. That particular fee tax would raise about $400,000 or so. So the question becomes, how important is it to raise $400,000? And everyone's committed to not doing that if there's any way we possibly can. So it's tabled, it's not defeated, it was not voted on,
okay.
And it's simply sitting there.
So the pathway I'm going with this is, this sounds like what you and other local governments are having to deal with is you can't go above the 0.7.
Right.
If you can't do that and raise the revenue you need, and the only other alternative is cut services, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is raising revenue through fees a way around the tax cap for localities?
Yes, in a word, yes. And that's the reason it's on the table. When you're looking at these kinds of difficult decisions, you have to put all of your options out and then eliminate those that are not viable. And there are other options that have been discussed as well. None of this means we're going to do it, such as appealing to the state for an additional mortgage tax and
okay.
and those kinds of things. One of the reasons the license fee was initially attractive, and one of the people that actually argued in favor of serious consideration was Mark Farrell. And Mark's point, which is absolutely right, whether we do it or not, but Mark's point was this. He said, look, we can go above the tax cap, which some people advocate for, including the former chair, Mike Chapman. We can go above the tax cap. What that means then is no one gets the rebate that the state is giving for staying within the tax cap. So what happens is the average household, the average family loses $90 in a rebate from the state. But we can do that. An alternative is to look at the license fee. It's going to cost the average family, has 2 cars, it's going to cost them $10 a year. So the arithmetic
It'll
is,
cost them $10, but they're going to get 80
gonna-
others.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it balances out. Now, I'm not suggesting that we are going to pass that additional tax, and it is a tax, I understand that. I'm not suggesting we are going to do so. What I'm saying is that these are exactly, though, the kinds of things we take into consideration as we look at what we're going to do to make sure that balance, the budget is balanced.
And where I'm going with this, you see this until the state reforms the way it does the tax cap currently. This is an option to look at fees, go a different way to get
Right.
beyond that, even though that's not the intent. Now, Senator DeFrancisco was here in this seat on Thursday, and he said we need to fix the way the tax. He wasn't saying mandate reform, by the way, just
Right.
though he has been a strong supporter of it for many years. But he did say this 2% versus the, in your case, 0.7. He's threw out some other numbers. He has said that's got to be
Yes,
fixed.
it does not work.
Would the county, I guess I'm asking you as the chairman of the legislature, would you want it reformed, or would you like to have the 2% automatically just tossed out?
Well, I would prefer to have it tossed out. One of the things, if you look at local government, the history of local government, by and large, local government has been better positioned to exercise fiscal restraint than state government, and certainly better than federal government. So in some respects, it's a bizarre situation that the state government, which creates budget problems for localities through mandates and through other kinds of the passing down of costs and limitations on revenue, it's peculiar to me that the state looks and says to localities, you may not do this, or this. In this case of the tax cap, you may not raise your taxes more than this. Based upon what? Based upon our inability to manage our affairs. If you look at history, we have done a much better job than the state, and yet the state uses us as, quite frankly, as a political football. It looks good, and it's
And
not.
by the way, the people who pass this don't have to put local governments together,
Exactly.
or local budgets together.
Exactly.
So, on that particular front, as a percentage of your budget, do you have any idea, and I know you're part of the New York State Association of Counties, and Cayuga County has been a very active part of that. I know they have done some data collection over time. Any idea how much of your budget is either state or federally mandated?
Those are the numbers that are thrown around, and they hold for us. If you take all mandates, the numbers are somewhere between 60 and 70% of the total budget, and that holds for most everyone.
And so those are things that you can't cut. You don't have a
Right,
choice.
right.
So what can you cut out of a budget?
Well, the things that aren't mandated are highway maintenance. We don't have to fix roads. We don't have to plow roads. The highway public safety, we don't have to have a sheriff's department. We cannot patrol the roads.
So only things that people really want to pay
Yeah,
for.
exactly.
No, I'm being
No,
serious about it.
and
I mean, these
know,
are the things
exactly.
that you, in your budget, those are the items that people want. Whether you're supportive, and I don't know where your position is, whether it's public libraries or the arts or any of these other things that when you decide to cut them, or the legislature as a whole puts it on the table, these are the things that taxpayers want to pay for. It is not necessarily items that go in the rubric of welfare or
Right.
mental health or those other items. Am I correct?
Right. Yes. And so that creates a real dilemma. Now, having said that, I mean, there are a lot of social services, mandated or not, the government needs to provide. No one wants people to go hungry. No one wants people to go without shelter. No one wants to allow the child abuse and those kinds of things which we're involved in. And so the mandates are a tricky thing in that respect.
But let me say, so one of my favorite parts of last Thursday's Citizen was they got rid of that 2 cent, or the comments, because my favorite ones were about this particular motor vehicle. Let me get in there, and they don't ever say their name, by the way, but I'll cut it. And again, they put it on the rubric of welfare or Medicaid or something like that. Real simple, nobody ever says go out and cut the sheriff's department.
Yeah, that's simple too. I mean, everything, it's simple to cut as long as you aren't going to provide services.
And by the way, I don't have a problem with people making comments. I just want them to identify themselves.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I am anonymous here, aren't I?
you are anonymous here. So you spent so many years here. How many years were you on staff here?
About 20.
And you're a dean emeritus here?
I am, yeah.
So what is your current fund balance roughly?
About 20 million.
And how much did you, not you, but the legislature, because you were not the chairman last December when this budget was passed.
That's correct.
How much of the fund balance did you use last year?
We won't know until you mean this year or last?
Last year, how much was approved in the budget?
Was approved was last year's budget. We only budgeted about $350,000 to be drawn from fund balance. This year's budget, we budgeted almost $2 million to be drawn.
It's almost 10%.
Yeah.
Over 10%.
No, 1%.
10% of the fund balance, though.
Oh, yes. Right.
No, I'm talking about what you have in your rainy day fund.
And let me talk about fund balance for a minute, because it's a concept that is misunderstood. This $20 million is a lot of money. The problem is this: when you start using fund balance for operations, what you're doing is you're removing the possibility of putting money into infrastructure, capital, the projects, roads, buildings, all of the other things that have to be done. That's been done for many years. The reason that our roads are in such bad condition is because we haven't put enough money into them. The reason that our building, particularly the county office building, is such in bad condition is because we deferred maintenance. You can only do that so long. So we have to have somewhere between 10 and 13 million, in that range, for operations. If we don't have that much money in a fund balance, then during periods when cash is not coming in,
2008, 2009,
then you have to borrow. So you want to avoid that. But even during a year, even during a regular year, people pay their taxes in January and in October. And so you have to have, during the down times, you have to have the cash available to pay your bills. So that's somewhere between 10 and 13 million. Then you also want, as you pointed out, you want a little bit of a buffer so that during economic downtimes, you don't go Detroit, and so that's another million or two. So if you look at that total thing, the amount of money that's available is a couple million at this point. But if we use that to balance our operating budget, then we're going to continue this process of not putting money into fixing our roads, not putting money into fixing our buildings, and we're simply going to kick the can down the road until things really collapse, and then we'll have to raise taxes substantially.
So with that in mind, if you have roughly a $750,000 budget gap right now, preliminarily, where do you see cuts coming or fees being raised? How do you close that gap?
Yeah. Well, what we've done is we've put together some groups that are composed of legislators and staff, and they've broken down. There's a group that's looking at revenues to see where we can eke out a couple dollars here and there in the other place. Because we do charge for some services, and we're looking at all of those to see if we can increase any of those fees. We're looking at issues like how do we, in the long run, how do we look at reorganizing the county? Because the only way in the long run that we can get a handle on the budget is some fundamental reorganization. You know, right now we have something like 30 departments, and all of those departments have one or two receptionists. All of those departments have the equivalent support
So you're looking
staff.
at duplications of services, not
Exactly.
necessarily programs.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have to do that in the long run. Now that will take time. We're not going to do that this year, but it puts us on a path. And one of the things we've said all along is that if we can't balance the budget in 17, but we have a path toward a balanced budget, I and the Democratic caucus can live with that. What we can't live with is the idea of continuing year after year after year, having no plan, having no way, no idea of how we're going to get to a balanced budget. So having said that, I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to get to somewhere around 500, 700,000.
Over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and where that comes from, I don't know, but I think we can do that.
You mentioned Mark Farrell a few minutes ago. He recently resigned from the legislature. Why?
Yeah, it's a great loss. And for personal reasons. He's the.
But a really excellent legislator, been very committed to a lot of time and effort. He was the chairman of your Ways and Means Committee.
Yes, yeah.
Have you replaced him on that committee?
Yes, Aileen McNabb Coleman, who was vice chair of the committee, has agreed to step up, which was a great relief for me.
But she's a freshman legislator in the Senate.
Yes, but because she was vice chair, she's been involved in the committee intimately from the beginning, and so she's absolutely prepared to take over, and she's taken over.
So just a quick moment. How big a loss is Mark Farrell to you and the legislature?
Oh, he's a big loss. Mark was absolutely engaged in everything we did. He's one of the people. He always did his homework. He always thought things through. He always had good ideas to propose. So he's a huge loss. On the other hand, one has to respect he had personal reasons for resigning, and so one has to respect that.
So you had 3 ways to deal with his vacancy, the vacancy created by his resignation. You could have a special election, you could appoint somebody, or you could just leave it vacant until 2017. Am I correct on that? Those were the 3. There was another option as well?
No, we cannot call a special election. Only the governor can call a special election.
Okay.
And only the governor only calls a special election if the local governing body cannot agree on
And he had resigned 2 days after the deadline for a regular election. Am I correct on that? I thought I read in the Citizen.
I believe you. I don't know.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, I don't know exactly what the dates are. I
Okay.
know there is a date of record beyond which you don't vote in the next thing. But we're way past the
process for nominating.
Yeah, and
for,
because you wouldn't have had a name on a ballot no matter when.
So with that, leave vacant or appoint.
Right.
What did the legislature choose to do?
We chose to appoint, and for I think obvious reasons. You don't want people being unrepresented. Particularly in this process like this, we're going through the budget. It's important to have someone representing every single citizen in the county.
So you appointed Grant Kyle, who's a businessman who lives in Brutus. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
He's an independent.
Yes.
What was the vote to appoint him?
It was unanimous except for Tucker Whitman voted no.
He represents the 1st district up in northern Cayuga County.
Way north, and Paul Pinckney was absent.
Okay.
But I spoke with Paul, and he was supportive.
So who is Grant Kyle?
He's, as you say, he's a local business guy. He's young. He's about 30. He's been in business with his family. They just recently bought the old Marine Midland building, the old Nolan block. They have some other business holdings. He's a member of Auburn Public Theater Board, the Cayuga Museum Board, a couple of other boards. So he's active in the community. He's smart.
Do you think it was easier to get him appointed because he was an independent versus from any particular party?
Well, in some respects, yes and no. It was probably easier to get a unanimous vote, but it's one of those things. It's numbers, and because
the makeup of the without Mark Farrell, because he obviously couldn't pick a successor. What was the vote? What was the breakdown of the legislature beforehand?
Before Mark, there was we had about a two-person majority.
Okay.
After Mark, we had a 1-person majority.
Okay.
So we still had the majority
with weighted votes and
yes.
Okay.
Well, even by numbers.
Even by numbers.
But the intent of frankly of appointing a nonpartisan person was nothing more than and nothing less than finding the best person. I mean, he's going to be a great legislator, and that's what we wanted, and that's what I think in him what we have.
So Republican County Party Chairman Jeff Herrick thought a special election should have been called. Now, am I correct in remembering this, that when Republicans had the legislature prior, they did the same thing? Now, they didn't necessarily pick an independent, but they did make appointments. They filled vacancies, right. Whether it was Earl Lamphere, I can list a whole host of them. So this was
a list.
A list, okay. So I thought I read in one of the news stories that Republican Minority Leader Mike Didio signed off on this process early on as well. Am I correct? That you had gone through. On doing this, is Mr. Kyle caucusing with the Democrats, the Republicans, or nobody?
You know,
Or haven't you had a caucus
we
yet?
haven't had a caucus yet, and I was thinking about that, and and I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm assuming he will caucus with the Democrats, but quite frankly, I don't know. I have to call him and ask him.
So in doing this, did you do anything obviously an independent, because I was trying to rack my brains, go through the last 30 years. I don't know that they've ever appointed an independent. It's always been, and for those years it was a Republican, so they appointed a Republican even if a Democrat represented that seat. Did you do anything in this process that was different from the past, other than that particular item?
That's a big particular. I mean, from the standpoint of partisan politics, that's a huge difference. So I don't know how they've done it before.
Okay.
I have no idea. What I know is I called and spoke with Mike Didio, and to find out what his feelings were about a special election. Because when this came about, I had no idea of how it worked, and I don't think any of us did. And so initially I thought the option was special election or appointment. Well, it turns out that that's not the only option is appointment or leaving it open. But I spoke with Mike about what he thought about a special election when we thought it was a possibility, and he immediately said, no, we don't want to do that.
And do you expect Mr. Kyle to run for election next year?
I don't know, and I haven't had those conversations.
And if he doesn't seek re-election or he doesn't win, then whoever wins November of 2017 serves the remaining 2 years.
That's
takes
correct.
over on whether it's November, whatever the election is.
Right, and that's my assumption. My assumption is, unlike a regular election where you take over January 1st, that in this would be a special election, that you assume office the next day.
Like a school board usually
That's what
does.
I would assume.
And what committees did you assign him to?
The ones that Mark was doing, except of course not chair Ways and Means. That might have been a.
Is he on
too
Ways
heavy
and
lift.
Means?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
so you gave him other.
Right.
I want to real quick, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes, and we're going to do a special show on this next week with representatives from OWL and the city's water department. Blue algae has been identified in Owasco Lake, and blue algae is an issue across many water bodies in upstate New York. It almost seems, excuse me, that the state of New York leaves it up to each individual county to set the regulations for the most part on how to deal with issues like this. Should this be something where the state has uniform regulations, than leaving it up to each individual watershed or local municipality?
Well, the government works best when it's at the lowest level, I think, in general, with some general protection overall. So there are certain things that we all want in terms of the fairness and what we stand for is right. So for example, on a broad scale, voter registration. We want people to be allowed to vote.
But how about such as
no, and that's what I'm getting
water.
at. So a concept that where the state says, look, no one will have the less regulation than this, but if you need more in your locality, then you have the right to do that. Unfortunately, in New York, what happens is if you're in an agricultural district, the ability of the locality to institute rules and regulations that have any impact on the right to farm is severely limited, and that creates a potential problem.
So going back to that, would you say the state should step in?
I should think in that case the state does step in, and they step in a negative way.
How big an issue is this? How large an issue is this for you? How concerned are you about this issue of blue algae?
Very, very concerned, because we have a short-term problem with the safe drinking water, which is a public health concern, and we have to fix that between now and
And is the county
next year.
doing anything
Yes.
at this time? Okay.
Yeah, we've been involved in a number of discussions with state people, and those will continue, and we will seek a solution this year. Then in the long run, we simply have to look at what we do to protect the health of the lake. And not just Owasco. Don't forget that hydrilla has now been found off the coast of the Aurora. And hydrilla is a devil invasive weed. If hydrilla gets a foothold, some places in Florida have lakes that are completely matted so firmly that you can almost walk across them. And so we have these challenges in all of our water bodies.
I only asked, I talked to a legislator over the state legislator over the weekend, and his comment to me was, this jumped ahead of job creation, ethics for the locality. Blue algae and lake quality had jumped. We'll see in the next 3 weeks.
We will. I'm glad to hear that.
We want to thank Cayuga County Legislative Chairman Keith Batman for joining us for a county update. He may be joining us later in the fall to talk about the budget, but more importantly, we'd like to have him back here in the spring to give us a county update as well.
Great.
Next Tuesday, our guest on Inside Government will be the city's Director of Municipal Utilities, Seth Jensen, and the Owasco Watershed Lake Association's current president, Bob Brower, and former president, James Beckwith, to discuss the issue of blue algae and lake quality. On Beyond the Front Page, we'll have representatives from the Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, those where you may be watching these shows over the weekend, to talk about what services they provide beyond just broadcasting these shows. In the coming weeks, we'll have Auburn's new city manager, Jeff Dygert, who will be joined by Mayor Michael D. Quill, as well as School Superintendent Jeff Perazzola from the Auburn Large School District will be on to give us a district update. Later in the month, we will be hosting, as we normally do, our forums for the New York State Assembly and Senate. We have confirmed the candidates for the 51st Senate District. That's James Seward, who's the incumbent, and his challenger, Jermaine Bagnell Graham, for Thursday, October 20th. That's next week. And the candidates for the 126th Assembly District are Assemblyman Gary D. Finch and challenger Diane Dwyer will be here on Tuesday, November 1st. We also plan to bring you at least one candidate for the 51st Senate District to replace retiring Senator Michael F. Nozzolio. Democrat Kenan Baldridge has agreed to appear, but his Republican opponent, Pam Helming, has declined at this point, and we are still waiting to see if Floyd Rayburn, who is still on the ballot, even though he lost the Republican primary to Ms. Helming, will be joining us. Before we go, though, if you would like to let us know your ideas for questions or thoughts for future shows other than for the forums, those questions are asked by Jeremy Boyer, you can contact us at cozguytho@aol.com or at Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, and if you stick around, we'll be talking a little bit of baseball and not the World Series.